the divine protectress. Among Egypt's female deities were goddesses of fertility, childbearing, and healing, but their roles extended far beyond those of nurturers and protectors. Sekhmet and Neith were venerated as powerful and belligerent forces. Isis was the supreme magician, and Ma'at symbolized the order of the universe. Hathor was celebrated as the goddess of love, music, and dance. So great was the fame of many of these goddesses that they were recognized well beyond the confines of Egypt. The most enduringly popular of all goddesses was Isis, whose cult was adopted enthusiastically by the Greeks and Romans. Her influence in the Roman Empire reached as far as Britain, where today many bridges on the River Thames bear her image. Isis spanned many aspects of Egyptian culture. With Osiris, she was said to have helped civilize Egypt, taught the people how to farm, given them the secrets of medicine, and instituted the custom of marriage. A wall painting from the Theban tomb of Nefertari, wife of Ramesses II, shows the goddess Isis leading the dead queen by the hand. From New Kingdom times, Isis was often identified with the cow goddess Hathor, whose horns she wears sheared. Isis may possibly have evolved from an early fertility goddess. Archaeological finds affirm that the early Egyptians worshipped the goddess whose potbelly clearly demonstrated her fecundity. During Greco-Roman times, Isis was the most revered of female deities, and her international cult rivals even the new Christian religion associated with Osiris. She was at the same time his sister and his wife. The pharaohs themselves often married their own sisters. Isis helped Osiris in the struggle with his brother Seth, bringing Osiris back to life by taking the shape of a kite and flapping his wings to put breath into his body after Seth had used the wings to kill him. As she gave birth, the revived God impregnated her, and in due course she gave birth to a son, Horus. Isis's act of resurrection frequently appeared on top. It bore the image of a bird enfolding the dead. As the mother of Horus, Isis was regarded not only as a link between royalty and the gods, but also as having a maternal role that extended to the population at large. She became venerated as the protector of children and women, and also called upon in magical spells to cure childhood ailments. And a typical example, to heal a scald, a plaster of human milk, gum, and cactus was applied to the sore spot, while an incantation told Isis that her son was in the desert with no water to soothe him. The expected response from Isis was that she would alleviate pain with a mixture of saliva and water between her thighs, and euphemistically thighs. Having given birth to Horus at Chemosh in the Nile Delta, Isis watched over her son assiduously, so that he might grow up to avenge his father. And just as the legends of Horus and Seth spread, so too did Isis's attributes grow more numerous. She was respected as the devoted wife, the ideal mother, a healer, a resurrector, a deity of children and fertility, and finally a goddess of magic and honor. More clever than a million gods. Notable among the feats was the occasion when she tricked Seth into proclaiming his guilt in front of the Aeneid and her discovery of the secret name of Ra. A squatting woman goes into labor with the assistance of twin images of Hathor. One of two major deities invoked in childbirth. The other was the hippopotamus goddess Aret. This Ptolemaic relief comes from Dendera, north of Thebes. Hathor, goddess of love and fertility. The goddess Hathor was accorded almost as much respect as Isis, and, like Isis, was given many identities. She could be shown in human form, or as a cow, or a lion, or even occasionally a snake, or a sycamore tree. She was also Lady of the West, the land of the dead, and a funerary goddess. As the eye of Ra, Hathor could also take the form of the destructive lioness Sekhmet. In her cow form, she was a goddess of fertility. As such, she had a special association with royal birds. She, as well as Isis and Nut, was seen as the symbolic mother of each pharaoh. The pharaoh was sometimes portrayed drinking the milk of the goddess Hathor in reaffirmation of his divine right to rule Egypt. There was a further connection between Hathor and the pharaoh. Hathor was Horus's wife, and each pharaoh was considered the earthly embodiment of Horus. Each pharaoh was entitled to be described as the son of Hathor. However, the pharaoh was equally considered the son of Isis as her cult grew in popularity. In time, the two goddesses became virtually interchangeable. As the sworn enemy of evil, Hathor shook her favorite musical instrument, the sistrum, a kind of rattle, to drive away malign influences. Like Isis, Hathor was a healing goddess, and as the cult center in Dendera, magic cubicles were constructed for the sick who came to be purified, and hopefully cured by the water of the Nile. It was her curative powers that restored Horus's sight after his eyes had been torn out. In this detail from a Theban tomb painting, a female musician entertains guests at a banquet. The cone on her head is believed to represent the perfumed oil worn on both hair and skin. Hathor's popularity enhanced by her role as the goddess of love and beauty, music and dance. She was described as she of the beautiful hair. And in love poetry, she is characterized as golden, or the lady of heaven. At Dendera, it was believed that after an episode of sexual abandon, she and Horus would produce a son called Egon, whose name was interpreted as Sistrum Laer, who fittingly personified musical ecstasy. Her eroticism once practiced magic even on the majestic Ra. One time, when he was a child, Hathor danced naked in front of him until he started to smile. Her priest would ritually reenact this dance by carrying her statue from the darkness of its shrine at Dendera onto the roof of the temple, where, to the accompaniment of music, she was once again bathed in the glow of Ra's smile. Hathor's associations with Ra were numerous. In some rituals, she was referred to as the mother of Ra, and represented as a cow carrying an emblem of the sun between her hands. In others, she was called the daughter or the eye of Ra. Her name means temple of Horus. Horus, which strengthens her identification as Lady of the Sky. Horus was Lord of the Sky. Hathor was renowned and celebrated not only by the Egyptians, but also by the Greeks, who linked her with their goddess of love, Aphrodite. In Byblos, a major center for the timber trade, she was heralded as the Lady of Byblos. And in the Cyprus Peninsula, where desert mines supplied the she was Nebat, or mistress of turquoise. Furthermore, any land from which she derived income was seen as a part of her domain. Around 2250 BC, an official called Hathor was reported as bringing from Nubia a train of 300 donkeys, laden with bounty, including ebony, incense, elephant tusks, and panther skins. Rather than being seen as the booty that it really was, this cargo was described as Hathor's gift to the pharaoh. The swollen belly of this statuette is of the hippopotamus goddess called indicates her role as a patron of childhood in the underworld. Hathor is also identified with the underworld. Her role as a funerary goddess was particularly prominent at Thebes, where the necropolis on the west bank of the Nile was under her protection as Lady of the West. She was often depicted welcoming souls into the underworld with beneficent gifts of refreshing food and drink. The dying hoped that in the afterlife they would be counted as part of the following of Hathor, so that they might receive protection. The Lady of the West was customarily depicted as a cow leading the arid desert, where most chronic burials took place, to drink from the papyrus marshes. The everlasting life that the Egyptians hoped to achieve after death was in this way linked with the ever-renewing fruitfulness of the Nile, which could be seen with their own eyes. Once the deceased had entered the underworld, Hathor offered more than merely sustenance. She was also believed to lend the worthy ones her outer robe, which would grant them safe passage through any dangers that they might face on their unknown journey. The goddess of fertility, Hathor was sometimes depicted in the underworld alongside Taweret, who, as a pregnant hippopotamus goddess, was a protector of women in childbirth. Taweret was one of the consorts of Seth, who could also appear in the same animal form, and in the battle between Horus and Seth, she switched allegiances to take Horus' side. When Horus cut off Seth's leg, which Seth had used in the guise of a bull to trample Osiris to death, he flung the men into the sky. It was the magic of Taweret that prevented it from causing any further harm. Another of the goddesses of childbirth was Heket, who would be summoned to hasten the final stages of labor. There is some evidence to suggest that midwives were known as servants of Heket, one of the Ogdoath, the group of created divinities. She took the shape of a frog. This outwardly unappealing form was, in fact, a harbinger of the Nile's forthcoming abundance, because when the Nile flooded, frogs seemed miraculously to appear from the mud. The goddess of soft death was also associated with the season of fertility through the identification of the dog-star Sirius, whose appearance above the horizon in July heralded the coming of the flood. Another patron of childbirth was the goddess Meshkinet, who represented the so-called birth grid on which women squatted to give birth. She was believed to be able to predict a child's destiny at the time of its nativity, although from the without shade. Her function in helping with birth extended to the afterlife, and she would assist the dead to be reborn. A bronze statue from early in the first millennium BC shows the cat goddess Bastet shaking the rattle-like iron wall to the cistern. The festival of Bastet. The festivals held annually at the Delta city of Bubastis in honor of the cat-headed goddess Bastet were among the best attended ones in Egypt. Colorfully reported by Herodotus, these events were widely held to be fabrications until archaeologists discovered evidence to confirm it actually happened. By the late period, Bastet's festival was one of the most popular in the Egyptian calendar. For ceremonial purposes, the town of Bubastis, 50 miles northeast of modern Cairo, was best approached by water. They come in barges, wrote Herodotus of the festival, men and women together, a great number in each boat. On the way, some of the women keep up a continual clatter with castanets, and some of the men play flutes, while the rest, both men and women, sing and clap their hands. Whenever they pass a town on the riverbank, they bring the barge close inshore. Some of the women continue to act as I have said, while others shout abuse at the women of the place, or start dancing, and stand up and pitch their skirts. When they reach Bubastis, they celebrate the festival with elaborate sacrifices, and more wine is consumed than during all the rest of the year. Herodotus recorded at least 700,000 people, excluding children, arriving in similar fashion to pay their respects at the red granite temple, which had been erected in honor of the goddess. Again, according to Herodotus, cats which have died are taken by the Bastis, where they are embalmed and buried in sacred receptacles. Thousands of the dead creatures were mummified and interred in underground galleries here and at other sites, so that they might carry their owners' messages all the more swiftly to the realm of the gods. The sheer scale of the festival seemed incredible to early Egyptologists, but in 1887, an archaeologist called Edouard Neville, excavating the site, discovered that Herodotus had indeed spoken the truth. He uncovered the site of Bubastis' main temple, the catacombs of mummified cats, and a number of pharaonic shrines, which proved that even the highest born venerated Bastet. Hatshepsut, the best known of Egypt's few women pharaohs, kneels to receive the benediction of the seated Amon-Ra and the lion-headed goddess Sekhmet in this carved 15th century BC relief from the temple of Karnak in Thebes. The cat goddess. One of the most popular goddesses was Bastet, whose name means she of the ointment jar. Bastet was originally depicted as a lioness wielding a scepter, but over time she dwindled in ferocity to become a cat-headed goddess holding the musical instrument known as a sistrum. The cat, far from being a symbol of power like the lion, was seen as a free-spirited embodiment of household entertainment. Although most often linked with royalty, cats were favorite pets in even the lowliest household. Like Hathor, Bastet was considered to be a daughter of the sun god and was a national deity of protection. She was celebrated at lively festivals with dancing, music, and sistrum playing at her cult center, Bubastis. The Egyptians recognized the potential for destructive behavior in their gods and goddesses Hathor provided a particularly vivid example of this when she adopted the form of the leonine minstrel Sekhmet, with a compulsion to destroy the whole of humanity. Sekhmet was also associated with the plague and was sometimes seen as the consort of Ptah, the Memphis creator god. The opposite natures of the lion and the domestic cat are seen in the following myth, where Hathor is identified as Sekhmet until she returns to the care of the sun god. The story is also typical in the encompassing the several aspects of Hathor. Hathor is the Eye of Ra, rebelled against the sun god and fled to the deserts of Nubia. Thoth, the eternal peacemaker, was sent to find her, disguised as a baboon. But when he discovered her, she did not appear either in her normal form as Hathor nor as Sekhmet, but as the cat goddess Bastet. Thoth used all of his charm to make her homesick, recounting stories of Egypt and the lion she had left behind. But all this was to no avail, and instead of being charmed, Bastet suddenly turned into Sekhmet, the furious lion goddess. Thoth redoubled his efforts, finally to good effect. Soothed by his words, Hathor agreed to return with him to Egypt, where she was greeted at the border by crowds of well-wishers. However, their difficulties were not over, and a serious danger faced them before they could return. Shortly before they reached the end of their journey, Hathor fell asleep, and Apophis, the serpent of chaos, came to attack her, just as he was about to kill her. Thoth saw what was happening and came to her rescue by shaking her awake. They now entered Heliopolis and triumphed, whereupon the Eye of Ra reunited herself with the sun god. Other goddesses. Initially associated with funerary rites, Neith, an ancient archer goddess of the Delta, was symbolized by a shield and crossed arrow. She was identified with Athena by the Greeks and with Diana by the Romans. A fearsome but righteous deity, she was a wise mediator, often described as a divine mother figure and sometimes regarded as the mother of Sobek, Isis, Ra, and even Apophis in one myth. She is credited as the first being to appear on the primeval mound. At times she could even intercede with the Aeneid, and she played a judicial part in the epic battles between Horus and Steph. Satis, a goddess associated with the island of Elephantine, guarded the southern frontiers of Egypt, but her protective role was not exclusively martial. With her cult center situated at the point where the annual inundation first becomes apparent, she was given a share of the credit for this event, and because of her association with the Nile's sacred waters, she was seen, too, as a purifier of the dead. Over the centuries, the native Egyptian goddesses were joined by foreign deities during the rule of the Hyksos, immigrants whose name simply means rulers of foreign lands, who appear to have entered Egypt peacefully during the 18th to 16th centuries BC from the area of Palestine. These striking deities were added to the pantheon. The two martial goddesses, Anat and Astarte, and a goddess of love, Khutshut. Egypt's goddesses enjoyed a popular appeal which the gods, for all their pomp and importance, never quite achieved. Indeed, When the closure of all the temples had been ordered by the Roman Emperor Theodosius in 384 AD, one continued to function, the Temple of Isis at the city of Philae near Aswan on the Egypt-Nubia border. Until around 535 AD, this remained the simple or cult of Isis, which had been powerful enough to challenge early Christianity for religious supremacy. Wives of Seth. Following Seth's long and unsuccessful battle with Horus for the Egyptian throne, the goddess Nate suggested to the council of gods that Seth be awarded a legal title. The foreign daughters of Ra were offered him as a gift. The involvement of these divine consorts, Anat, Astarte, may be connected with Seth's own affinity with the foreign gods Baal and Reshach. With evil intent, Seth, the troublemaker of the Egyptian pantheon, approaches Anat in the form of a ram. One day, as Seth was walking by the Nile, he came across the goddess Anat, bathing in the stream. He changed himself into a ram and had his way with her. But Anat could only be impregnated by divine fire, and so her body expelled with such force that it struck him in the forehead, making him dangerously ill. Seth was relieved of his punishing headache by Ra, whom Isis sent to cure him. In another myth, of which only a part has ever been found, the gods of Egypt were in conflict with the sea god Yam, and were coming off the worst. Yam demanded tribute of gold, silver, and lapis lazuli, which was duly brought to him by the goddess Renenenu-Tet. However, having received these treasures, he became greedy for more and insisted on further tribute. He threatened that, if his demands were not met, he would enslave every god in Egypt. In despair, Renenenu-Tet pleaded for help from Astarte, who was famed both for her beauty and her ferocity. The messenger, in the shape of a bird, begged Astarte to carry the extra tribute to Yam. Reluctantly, Astarte agreed, and when she reached the shoreline, her fiery nature got the better of her, and she began to taunt the sea god. Alternately outraged by her impudence and bewitched by her beauty, Yam demanded that he be given Astarte as well as the treasure. The goddess Renenenu-Tet retired to deliberate with the gods, who acceded to the sea god's demands, and furnished Astarte with a dowry consisting of Nut's necklace and Geb's signet ring. Seth, however, rebelled at the loss of his beautiful wife. Tantalizingly, the remainder of the story is lost. But the outcome, surely, was that whether by force or by guile, Seth overcame the sea god, saved Egypt's pantheon from slavery, and returned from the adventure with Astarte. Found in the palace of the Syrian kings at Nimrud, in what is now Iraq, this ivory plaque is thought to represent the goddess Ishtar, the Mesopotamian cousin of the Syrian divinity Astarte. Foreign goddesses. During the mid-2nd millennium BC, Egypt assimilated a wave of immigrants, mostly from neighboring countries, who added further deities from their own mythologies to the Egyptian pantheon. Of all the additions to the Egyptian gods at this time, none featured more prominently than the two warlike goddesses, Anat and Astarte. And at a later period, Khonshu, goddess of sexual love. Anat, a deity of battle, was, in a twist of the Isis myth, both sister and husband to the Middle Eastern god Baal, who was worshipped in Egypt as an aspect of Set. She is also depicted with Min, Egyptian god of fertility, an association that emphasizes the pronounced sexual nature of her cult. In Egypt, she was held to be the daughter of Ra. She was also linked with Hathor, as both were associated with foreign lands. Both had a potential for aggression, and both were sometimes presented in a distinctly sexual manner. Astarte was also seen as a daughter of Ra, and additionally as a daughter of the curator god Hathor. She was particularly associated with horses and chariots, and is sometimes portrayed naked on horseback. Khufshu was, by comparison, a benign goddess. In Egypt, she was believed to be a consort of men, as well as being linked with Hathor. Not as Astarte, she carried only symbols of reproduction, such as the lotus. But the powerful sexuality she demonstrated was not to be doubted, for Khufshu stood naked on a lion. The goddess Hathor brings Greek King Seti I in a scene that originally embellished the Theban tomb around 1290 BC. The divinity of the pharaoh. From the beginning of the pharaonic times, Egypt's kings were revered not only as royal but divine. Their godhood served as a link between the land, the people, and the deities who ruled. In the hierarchy of the Egyptian religion, only the king was permitted to make offerings to the gods. There could be no other mediator between earth and heaven. Although such work might be well delegated to the high priest, recognized for the king, having in theory no authority of his own. Each pharaoh was a god from birth, while the queen mother was recognized by all as his human mother. The idea that he had been sired by Amon-Ra, incarnate as his royal father, was widely accepted. When the pharaoh had his own son, the same principle of divine incarnation would ensure that godhood was passed down through the dynasty. The coronation rituals further reinforced this concept, and at death, the king became not only taking the living form of Horus as ruler, he became one with Osiris in the underworld, while at the same time retaining his father Ra in his ascendancy over all things. All this was the most natural of arrangements, and a matter of simple, if wonderful, fact. None doubted the irresistible logic. God is our king, the king is a God. Established the Egyptian state as an entity sanctioned by the law of mankind and the gods. The late period bronze of the jackal-headed Anubis. The god embalmed the dismembered body of Osiris, for which service he became patron and fire. Conflicts of Horus and Set. The story of Horus and Set is the beginning of Egypt's long history. The early versions even refers to them as brothers rather than nephew and uncle. When the sun god Ra relinquished his rule on earth, he left his successor, his son Shu, who was succeeded by his son Geb, and then turned on his son Osiris. Following his marriage to his sister Isis, Osiris taught humankind the arts of agriculture and civilization, and proved a wise and just ruler. He brought abundance and prosperity to the land, and Egypt flourished. But the Golden Age was all too brief, for there was terrible jealousy within the god's own family. Osiris' younger brother, Seth, burned with envy and ruthlessly plotted against him. Osiris, so full of goodness, found it impossible to see evil in others and made no effort to protect himself from Seth's malice.